Welcome, everybody. This is Denny with Why Is This True? And joining me today from Taos, New Mexico is Matthew Ryan. Matthew and I have been friends on Facebook, but not had much interaction. So finally, I got around to inviting him to do this interview with me, and he graciously accepted. And Matthew has a very interesting website and service called Gamma Wave Healing. So we're going to talk about that and a bunch of other things. But thank you for joining me, Matt. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm really grateful to be here connecting with you, Denny. And I very much look forward to connecting with you more in the future. And hopefully maybe we'll cross paths at some of these conferences, coming up this year. But I definitely look forward to it.
So you have a busy year.
Yeah, it's shaping up to be pretty busy. The last year I didn't do very much travel. I held a retreat here in New Mexico, and then just pretty much focused on working with clients and getting out and doing some kind of more of my own spiritual development, travel and growth. I was able to get to Peru and got down to Teotihuacan for the moon dance this last October, and really some amazing opportunities. And now it looks like the energy is kind of pushing me forward in more of a way to be sharing the work that I do. And so coming up here shortly, I'm scheduled to be going to South Africa next month. Wow. To the Ubuntu Festival that Michael Tellinger has put together with the Ubuntu movement. I'm super excited about that opportunity, and going to be presenting there and doing some healing sessions there. And then hopefully also getting to travel around and check out, Adam's calendar and some of those other sacred sites there that he has brought forward into the public's awareness. And then in May, I'm going to be going back to Scandinavia to see clients. I haven't been there in been about a year and a half, I think, unfortunately. But we're going to get back to Denmark and Sweden and see some of my good friends and clients over there. And then coming back after that, it looks like I've just got something scheduled to go up to Calgary to work with a new group of people that I haven't ever worked with before. So that's pretty exciting. I've never been to Alberta, so looking forward to that. And then in August, then I'm going to be presenting out at the ECETI Ranch at the Soul Tech conference that has been announced a little while ago, and really, really honored and really excited to be a part of that, and just so excited to go out to ECETI and get to hang out with James and everybody, and get to check in on all the star beings that are coming in, maybe a Sasquatch or two. So I'm pretty stoked about that. That's in August.
Wow. And you're going to go to Contact
going to be pretty
too?
Busy.
Yeah, that's a lot. That's a lot of travel.
I'm planning on going to Contact.
And what time of the year is that?
It's gonna be a busy summer.
So it's at the end of May again?
What's that?
Contact? It's the end of May?
Contact, I believe, is the very first few days of June.
Oh, June. Okay.
It's I think it's like June 1st through the 4th.
Okay. All right.
So so we're gonna. I'd like to get out there and reconnect with a lot of friends and see some of the presentations that are always just so excellent there. So I'm looking forward to that for sure. Yeah. But that'll be kind of more of a pleasure cruise necessarily than working. So.
Okay, so you're not going to be a presenter or speaking there.
No, as far as I know, I haven't been invited to speak there yet, but I would love to in the future. That would be really exciting to be able to participate. But the last 2 years I've gone. 2 years ago, I actually won a ticket giveaway from Robert Bivall. He had a complimentary ticket that they did like a raffle drawing, and I won his ticket, which was great because then synchronistically I got to have breakfast with him one morning. So that's going to be a cool thing to get back there. I've gone now 2 years in a row and have really enjoyed it. I've met amazing people. If people haven't, ever gone to Contact in the Desert, it's just an extraordinary experience. And, one of the biggest things that I took away from it the first year that I went was that you're in a group of several thousand people that all hold the same view of reality, the same, consensus reality as you do. And when you're in a group like that, it creates a frequency field that literally rings out into the world and changes the world. it's really an extraordinary experience, and I'm very grateful, that they continue to have the event, and looking forward to it this year for sure.
That's great. So how did you get hooked up in Northern Europe?
Through a synchronistic connection with a friend. I have a friend that lives in Sedona, and she, at the time, this is a few years ago now, I think it's 4 or 5 years ago, this friend in Sedona was like a facilitator for some different retreats that were being hosted there in Sedona. And as she, whoops, sorry, my cat just push the camera a little bit. As she was as she was facilitating this workshop or this retreat, she ended up connecting in with several people from Sweden that were on the retreat. And one of these women that was on the retreat, her name is Åsa. She needed some healing support, and my friend said, "You've got to call this guy Matthew. My friend Matthew can help you." And so, she ended up, the woman from Sweden ended up calling me, and we made a connection. It was really kind of funny, actually. I don't even know how it happened. I was out hiking and was like way up in the mountains. Taos is right at the foothills it's right at the foot of the Sangre de Cristos mountains. And so I was like up in the mountains, and I had no thought of having cell reception, but I had my phone on me for like a clock, and suddenly my phone rings, and I was like, who the heck is this? Like, who's calling me up here on the mountain? And she says, "This is Åsa from Sweden, and, my friend told me to call you." And, and I was like, how in the world did this just connect? And so we ended up starting to do some remote healing sessions. And after a while, she asked me if I would be willing to come to her town in Sweden and work with people through her healing center that she had. And so I was really thrilled about that. And that was the first time I really began teaching the modality that I've developed. So I've gone over there, I think, to Sweden and Denmark. I've been over there 4 times because she connected me in, with other groups of people, and several different locations. And so I'm able to go over there and connect with people and share what I'm doing, and help them with what they're doing. It's just been extraordinary. I love Sweden and Denmark. They're both amazing places. The people are incredible. The society is, it's got its problems just like we do, but they're remarkably well adjusted, and such prosperous countries in so many ways. It's really an excellent time to go over there and visit.
Yeah, I've wanted to go there myself.
Yeah, have you ever been?
No, the closest I got was the UK in the 70s. And then, but I never made it over there. But my mom's side of the family, they're all from that part of the world. So, anyway, so you in your healing modality, you actually used EEG, right, for brainwave study. Is that correct?
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't quite say that I'd studied it, but I definitely had an opportunity to be connected onto a brain state technology machine that, has got an EEG with it. And it was really kind of an interesting situation. When I had already been practicing my modality, I'd had this modality developed through me kind of on its own. And, as a result of this close encounter that I'd had in 2004. And so at this point in time, I had already been doing healing work and doing readings for people, and had a very close relationship with one of my spiritual guides, who happens to be the star being that I had the close encounter with. And I knew that at some point I had this deep intuitive knowing that I was going to be teaching at some point. And I thought, well, I don't know what it is that I'm going to teach. That's like my work, how I'm going to do that. I'm probably going to have to come up with a name for, the modality. And this one day I was going fishing. I'm a fly fisherman, and we have a lot of, amazing water around here in northern New Mexico. And so I was on my way fishing, and every time that I would go and do this one particular hike down into the Taos Gorge, it's a kind of a strenuous, 30 to 45 minute hike, and I was hiking down, and I was just in total communication with her, with my guide. And at one point I asked her, I said, well, if I'm supposed to be teaching, what should I call this thing? And she said that, if you need a name for the modality that you're using, you can call it gamma wave healing. And I thought, oh, okay, gamma wave healing. Does that mean that, like, why is that? Is that like, am I working with gamma waves or a gamma state? And she said, yes, you're in a gamma state when you're doing the healing work. And so, I kind of held that name for, I think it was about 6 months. It was some point after that then, and a friend of mine had asked me if I would be interested in doing some trade with her, where she would receive readings from me, and then I would receive treatments on her brain state machine, like doing brain balancing and, et cetera. And so as an experiment, then I thought, oh, well, maybe I want to do a healing session while I'm actually hooked up to this machine and see where my brain activity is. And so that's exactly what we did. I facilitated a healing on myself. Like I checked in and went in and identified some things, did some clearing, came back out, and when we were discussing the results, she said that it was showing that I was registering a gamma state. So that for me and my Virgo mind, my scientific mind felt really appeased with that information because it's like I'd received this spiritual information, but then I was able to corroborate it in kind of a material way, by using the technology. And so the name has just stuck, with the modality, and maybe at some point down the road there will be a higher frequency definition of the work that that is coming through me. Maybe another name will come in at some point, but for now though, that's gamma wave healing seems to fit.
That's cool. Do you remember the name of the machine that she used?
Well, it's the technology is called brain state technology. It's like a business model where people get trained in doing essentially, I think it's like brain balancing. There are different ways that they use feedback. I don't know if it would be accurate for me to say that it's biofeedback. I don't know enough about it, but the way that it functions is you wear all of these electrodes all over your head, and you go through lots of different tests for it to like measure your brain activity, and then they have all of these programs within the technology that will then feed back to you, and it creates this balancing effect. And so that's as much as I know as far as the machine that she used. But I have some friends that are also practitioners, and really incredible things can be done with it. But I found it to be just really excellent in watching the changes, because we also were, after I was working on her, we would measure her activity, and she was gaining coherence in her brainwave activity as a result of my sessions. So
wow,
that was really cool.
Yeah, the reason I ask is because a lot of that technology is going into the consumer grade products where the prices are coming down and the technology is improving, and then the other reason I was curious about it is because there's the theta wave healing, which it relates to the theta wave brain state, Vienna Stable and that work.
Absolutely.
So I was kind of curious about that because it's always interesting.
I actually was a certified practitioner.
Yeah, I took a class back in.
Sorry, I interrupted you.
It's okay. We have a bit of a time lag, so it's okay. I took the class in 2014. And so as a result of taking that class, I was always curious, wouldn't it be cool to be able to get some feedback to see that you're actually in the theta wave brain state, So when I read that part of your story, I thought, I need to ask him about that, because I was curious about the technology. It's still kind of expensive, and but at some point I think it's going to be a really interesting tool for people just to have that kind of like, it's almost like third-party validation that, through your visualizations or your meditations or whatever, you're actually getting to a point that, where you're not just telling yourself you're in some state. You actually have some feedback where you're saying, oh, okay, that's what it feels like. You know how to navigate back there again.
Exactly. Yeah. That's exactly right. And what I had said was I learned theta healing back in, I think it was in 2006. Maybe right before my daughter was born, and you're exactly right about like that visualization and needing to or wanting to go into a corroboration of like what really is going on with the activity and the access that you're being granted. And it was really kind of an interesting moment right after I had learned theta healing. It really worked as a catalyst for me to develop my own process. It was like having a process that I could use, and it was exceptionally effective when I was using that. And then my own modality began to develop. As a result, I began like being taken into all of these other realms and seeing all these different things. But I remember a very specific moment back kind of in this period of time where I was checking in and communicating with guides, and I remember my dog used to always wake me up in the middle of the night. Like, he did this for like 5 years. He would wake me up every single night to let him outside, and so and it really, he would wake up nobody else. It was only me. And I realized he was trying to take me outside to like look at the stars, actually, because a lot of times he wouldn't need to go to the bathroom. But this one time I was outside and I saw the planet Jupiter was up in the sky, and it was like screaming at me. It was so bright. And I checked in and I said, what's going on with Jupiter? And I got this whole stream of information came in about Jupiter, and I stopped it and I said, well, wait a second. How do I know that I'm not making this up? Like, what is this? Just my imagination? And this guidance that asked me, they said, well, why do you think that you're just making it up? And I said, well, because the way the information is coming in, it feels like a daydream. And the information that I received then, it said, well, the why it feels like a daydream is because it's the exact same part of your brain that is processing the stream of information as processes the information in a daydream. This is your pineal gland. And I was like, oh, okay, that makes total sense. And so, my entire life I had been told by authority figures, by society, by teachers, whatever. Everybody was always like, stop daydreaming, pay attention, stop, that's not real, that's make believe.
Right.
Like all of this, our children just get like bombarded with this type of socialization, and it serves the purpose of taking them out of their pineal gland and out of these like psychic abilities, intuitive abilities, and then it gets them like locked into this materialistic paradigm. And so one of my biggest challenges early on was that I had to undo all of that conditioning to the point where I could actually trust the flow of information that was coming to me. And, by using this technology to verifiably prove that what's going on is actually a theta state or a gamma state, I think that that's really, really important. And I totally agree with you. As this technology comes down in price and makes it more accessible, and like all the other stuff, the Tesla technologies and, Rife technologies and these things, that we're going to really have a kind of an explosion of self-healing and awareness. And that doesn't even factor in the technologies that are supposedly being released to us, shortly, if all things keep going according to plan. So.
Yeah, the other one that I thought that's kind of interesting, has been around, and it is affordable, is the whole heart math. Where they're looking at your skin resistance and then your pulse rate, and they're looking at the state of your heart, and then they're able to figure out some kind of what they call a coherence level there, which is really helpful for meditations. But yeah, it's just interesting, especially when they're associating the healing modalities with a specific brain state that they could be measured. So when I took the class, I kind of felt it was over my head, and it was. But since then, I've pulled out some of the material, dusted it off, and I'm back reading it again. So. Yeah.
Yeah, so, I think that modality, the modality that I practice is, these types of things are really the way forward for people with their own self-healing, because at least when I'm teaching the workshops, if you have really kind of any level of aptitude, it's an easy, repeatable technique to learn. And even the handful of people that I've had in workshops that, let's say, didn't believe in themselves very strongly, or they didn't believe in their ability to be intuitive, you can assist them. They can actually gain access, and that's really exciting to me, because I think it's important for us to become accountable for our own healing. And to really participate in this shift by healing ourselves, maybe first, and then going out and sharing that with the world. So it's very exciting times right now.
So your class, when you teach people how to do the technique that you use, you do that work in person, or you also do that remotely?
I've never done it remotely as far as like a workshop. It probably could be done. I mean, I know I'm hearing that it can be done, but I haven't quite gotten there or needed to get there yet remotely. So usually these workshops are going to be in person because then it's much easier for me to be hands-on, right, and demonstration and things like that. But it's the way that the workshops have developed so far is that there are 4 workshops that I have that are kind of progressively advancing. And so in the first workshop that you could take, you'll learn some of the foundational kind of core techniques that I would use in sessions, and especially early on, in the first half of kind of my healing career, let's say, that nearly every single session we would go through and encounter these kind of core components. As the time has changed, and I believe as the energy has continued to shift, the work that I'm doing in my private sessions is really accelerating, and as people's energy bodies are advancing and activating and their DNA is becoming activated, we're going into much more advanced realms that, clearly I'm not going to be able to teach in like a level 1 workshop. But as you make your way through the progression of the 4 different workshops, there people that are healers, can really benefit, I think, from some of these advanced techniques that I've been able to be fortunate enough, to receive and then to be able to transmit and develop, so that other people can learn them as well.
So if somebody wanted to take one of your workshops, typically they would come down to Taos area, or you're going to go, but you're also doing your courses in Europe this year too, right?
Exactly. I mean, I absolutely am available to travel, to come and work with people. That's how this connection that is opening up in Canada, it's exactly how it opened up, where there's a man that had listened to my interview on Fade to Black last week and was very interested and connected with me, and he wanted to schedule a healing session at some point, and the conversation then kind of moved into, well, hey, would you be willing to come up here and teach? I've got a group of people that would want to learn, and that's absolutely possible. I love to teach. I love to be involved in these workshops and to share with people, to see people, have their energy bodies activate in this new way. And I've been really fortunate especially with my groups in Scandinavia that I've worked with. We've gone through the progression of all of the workshops, and so I've been able to watch just how much they've changed. I mean, it's really, really remarkable. And these were even people that were actively working in, in study groups through my friend's healing center, so they were not like baseline kind of average people. Let's say most of them were already like cultivating certain things, and to watch them accelerate their growth has just been extraordinary. So yeah, if somebody wanted me to come and teach, depending on where they're located and what the travel expenses, would look like, usually the minimum that I would say for a group would be like 6 people. If we could put together 6 people, then that makes it, cost effective for me to go travel. Most of the time, I think the biggest groups that I've worked with have been like 14 or 16 people, and that seems to be about the capacity that I would probably want, just to make sure that I'm able to give individual attention to everybody that needs it.
And you go through all 4 workshops in that travel, or you would just do one?
Yeah, it would just be one at a time. The way that the workshops is that they've been designed progressively. I've been really contemplating a little bit of a shift in the way that I'm doing the workshops, where I feel like I'd like to create a long-term kind of study program for people that are actively wanting to work with the healing techniques that I would teach, and then have that be kind of a long-term course of study where maybe I would come and visit their group we'd come and do a first in-person workshop, and then maybe 3 months later or 6 months later, I would come back and work with them again. And during that whole period of time, they would be like working with practicing the techniques and beginning to really fundamentally integrate them into their own modalities. That's something that I want to develop specifically for healers. But as it exists right now, the workshops contain different activations and different techniques that are both for self-healing and facilitating healings with others, as well as techniques that will increase your energetic access into information and perception, expanding your perception. And so they're kind of all progressive, they're mixed into this progressive 3 stages or like 3 levels, if you will. And then the 4th workshop is more of kind of like advanced techniques of different things like space clearing and et cetera. So it seems to work well, and the people, for the most part, the people that have gone through the workshops, the majority of them implement the techniques into their lives, and some of them are just looking for an activation and to like be in that energy, So and that's cool too.
Yeah. So do you have any family members that are interested in this? I mean, how's your family support around this work?
The family support is solid for sure. Although I think that for a few years, maybe certain members of my family, they what I was doing was a little bit out of their consensus reality, pretty far out of their consensus reality, to be honest. But due to their love, for me and the connection, we've been able to kind of bridge those gaps, and there's definitely a lot more understanding now of the way that I operate in the world, and they're very, very supportive. And it was really neat. My parents listened when I was on with Jimmy the other night, and my dad said he was really proud of me. And even though a lot of the stuff maybe he doesn't understand, but so the family support for sure is there. I have one sister that is very, very intuitive and very engaged, kind of into like Native American spirituality in a way. And, she lives here in Taos, along with me. And so, it's just kind of it's woven into a way of being, I think, if you live in this part of the country. But definitely there's a lot of support, and, I believe in some ways that when I came into this world, I inherited some different abilities from my mom and my dad, some intuitive abilities, but, their generation, the time period that they grew up in, they were born in the 40s. And so that period of time when they grew up, there just wasn't any kind of foundational support system to be able to like support and cultivate those things. And so I think those abilities were probably shut down or denied or rejected in some ways. And but they're always in there if you want to go find them.
Is there any history of healers in your family? Like if you've done like any looking back to grandparents or great grandparents or anything like that where you've discovered?
Yeah, my sister has gone through our genealogy quite a bit, and I don't know off the top of my head if there is specifically a healer, but I do know that there were some people in the lineage that had more of a spiritual connection than like any kind of a religious connection. I believe that there actually is a small percentage of Native American blood that is in there on one side of the family. But as far as the background, that I have, my mom's side of the family is part Hungarian. My mom is half Hungarian, half Italian, and her mother immigrated to the United States from Hungary, and they evidently came out of kind of like a blue blood wealthy family situation that was essentially overthrown, I guess, during the like Cultural Revolution or communist in engagements there. And so they literally fled, and several of my grandmother's siblings died crossing on the boat, crossing over, and so very kind of a harrowing experience. But I've always wondered about that, if that like I often will refer to it as like kind of like my Hungarian gypsy blood. Maybe there's something in there like around my skills with the tarot. But as far as actual, knowledge of people that are working in a healing capacity, I feel like, I'm kind of I'm the exception, maybe that's happening there.
So, but the tarot was something that you discovered pretty early on, right?
Yeah, that was really kind of the first modality that I started working with, which goes back to the year 2000. That was, I had my first real tarot reading on the summer solstice of 2000, and it was just a complete activation for me. And my brother-in-law, he kind of turned me on to it. And so I started working with the tarot and very quickly, developed an aptitude in doing intuitive readings and translating things. When I fast forward then a few years later, the readings that I was doing shifted dramatically after I had my close encounter, and the way that I was accessing information became a channel. So like I would end up going into a channel state, and the information for the reading just flows through me, and because it's coming through in that kind of channeled state, it's coming in at a very high frequency, and the information carrying energy will actually shift things energetically for people. So when they receive these channeled readings, it's it actually activates things. It's not just information. But looking at the relationship that I have with the tarot, I absolutely can see that connected into past lives that I've identified in Atlantis, in Egypt, probably maybe even like in Greece as well. But I've through regression work, I've seen many lifetimes, Atlantis and Egypt, and I know that they were working with a form of tarot in both of those civilizations.
So the tarot that you use now, is it the classical card set, or you use like an Egyptian card set, or or do you even use it now? Maybe you don't even use it now.
Yeah, I do still use the. About 80% of my work is probably healing work, like energetic healing, DNA and implants and things like that. And then roughly 20% are going to be channeled readings, either with tarot or directly communicating with guides. The deck that I use is the Taos deck, the one that Aleister Crowley designed.
Oh, interesting.
And I know that deck does, it polarizes a lot of people. But for me, there's it's true, but for me, my connection with it transcends anything, of the personal that may have been involved in the creation of it. The archetypal energies and imagery that is there, it goes through so many different frequencies, and so there's so much depth, and because of the nature of how I facilitate the readings now by being in the channeled state, I mean, we can flip over a card, and I usually would give them like an intuitive interpretation about how the energy of that card is a reflection of their situation. But when I step into the channeled state to do their channeled reading, the information is going to come through from a whole other source, like higher self kind of source, and it'll cut through a lot of those images. The information may not even be related to what the image is supposed to represent. So it's more of like a frequency attunement at that point that gets transmitted through to somebody. So yeah, I mean, it's funny. I've tried to work with other decks before, and I think my primary deck that I've got, it gets a little bit jealous maybe if I'm focusing on other readings, like I mean, not to personify it in that way. I'm being kind of facetious, but I always go back to it. It's definitely my tool, and probably the second deck that I work with would be the Osho Zen deck. That Osho Zen deck is just incredible. It's so beautiful. So
you had an encounter too. Yeah? Is that something you want to talk about?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I love talking about it, just to to kind of spread the information and really to dispel a lot of the fear frequencies. I started being guided several years ago to be very public and open about my experience and like talking about the star beings and these things, because it's really important that we go through, those of us that have these relationships or these connections with these star beings, that it's important for us to the negative frequency programming that has been just so prevalent for decades in our country. And that's we could have an entire discussion about all of that as well. But as far as the experience, yeah, I'd be happy to share about that. You want me to just jump in and and go for it, or do you have specific questions to lead into it?
Yep.
Yeah. So, I guess prefacing the experience, I would say that ever since I was a little child, I had a knowing that we were not alone, in this universe. That concept to me was just like preposterous, even when I was little. And there was always this knowing that there were these beings that are many of them much more advanced than us, that were in communication with us. And I since have learned, after kind of tuning in with Mary Rodwell and her information, if you're familiar with Mary Rodwell, once I got exposed to Mary Rodwell's work, and then I did some regression work of my own, I began to understand that I was having contact experiences while I was a child. While I would be asleep, I was having contact experiences, and then they would like wipe my memory. I would have no memory of the experience when I would wake up. At that level, there's always been a connection in with the star beings throughout my whole life. Fast forwarding then into when I had my close encounter, this was in early April of 2004. So I moved to New Mexico from Venice Beach. My then girlfriend, she eventually became my wife, and we're no longer together now. But she grew up in Taos, and we met in Venice Beach, and we both just decided, we're like, what are we doing here? Like, let's go to New Mexico. Let's get the heck out of LA. And so we moved to New Mexico in 2003, and just kind of settled into life here. And we ended up getting engaged. And so we had made this plan we wanted a destination wedding with just our immediate family. And so we wanted to go do a cruise in the Caribbean so we could go check out the main place we were interested in were St. John's and St. Lucia. And so we invited my mom to come with the two of us. And so this was going to be a really cool opportunity for Lane, for my fiance, to get to know my mom. And so leading up to when we were departing in April on that cruise, I had been working a lot and just trying to save money. And I finally had a day off, and I said, okay, what am I going to do on my day off? I'm going to go for a hike, And so where our home was is in this canyon that is it goes between the town of Taos and another town called Angel Fire. And so it's kind of, the elevation's about 7,500 feet or so up in the mountains. And I went on a hike. I loaded up my Camelback, and it was kind of, the weather was a little bit cooler than it is now. It was partly cloudy, just beautiful blue sky, partly cloudy day. And I left in the morning, probably like 9:30, somewhere in there. And I hiked up this mountain and got up onto a fire access road, like one of the Forest Service fire roads, and which is, really an easy way then to kind of maneuver the topography. If people aren't, familiar with it, that's like an excellent landmark. You can never get lost if you can hit the fire roads. And so I'd been up here several times and had many experiences actually running into elk. I've got elk medicine that I carry. Evidently, I've had many, many encounters with elk throughout my life, even when I was a child. And so I was actually expecting that I was going to have an encounter with an elk, not a UFO. And, so I went and I hiked over to this area that was in another side canyon, and it had a natural spring. There was like spring water coming out of the ground. And so all of the animals of the forest, they go there to drink. And so I was kind of like camped out for a little while away from the spring, observing the game trail leading to the spring. And, I sat there for, I'm going to guess I was there for maybe about 45 minutes, definitely a half an hour, maybe 45 minutes, because I started getting cold and my legs were getting stiff, and there were no elk. I could hear them, actually. They were like, I could hear them in the distance, like out of my visual range. And I realized, oh, wait a second, they can smell me, they can hear me, and they're not going to come through here when there's like a cold, uncomfortable human sitting right in the middle of their highway, And and so I was like, well, duh, of course, okay, I guess it's time for me to leave. And so I stood up and I put my Camelback back on. And I remember it was really interesting. I often forget to share this, but I looked ahead of me, like right in front of me. There were like the forest that I'm standing in is a high elevation. I'm probably up over 8,000 feet where I had hiked to, and so the forest there is like a spruce, fir, aspen forest. They're like spruce and fir trees, some ponderosa trees for sure, but like where I was down in this like little canyon, it's a little darker and it tends to be spruce and fir. And so there's spruce and fir trees all around me, and there were some aspen trees as well, like a couple of small aspen trees. And I was looking at this aspen tree right in front of me. It was really weird. It was like standing vertically, and it was snapped off, and it was kind of curved and bent down. And I was looking at it, and I thought, well, that's weird. Like what could have done that? The way that this was broken, what could have done that? And I literally saw in my mind, I saw like an external force, like energy, like pushing down onto this tree. And I was like, that's so strange. And right then I looked up above me, and like, I don't know why. Well, I mean, I do know why, but I had no sense of sound or anything. Like I just looked straight up above me, and from right above me came down a UFO. And it went from a really, really high frequency sound, like the propulsion system was like, like it cycled down from a really high frequency to the lowest frequency that I've ever been exposed to in my life. And it was just like when it came down, it was that cycling down of frequency took maybe 2 seconds or something. I mean, it was like rapidly decelerating. And when it stopped, it was directly above my head. I'm going to guess at about 100 feet of altitude, because it was above the trees for sure. And the trees there, I'm going to guess, are, maybe 60 to 70 feet tall. They're not like gigantic, but they're pretty tall. And the sound and the energy coming off of this thing was just absolutely undescribable. It was like there were waves of energy that were physically, like I could physically feel them. It was like being hit by waves when you're standing at the shore break and in the ocean, and they were like just absolutely pounding me. And it was the lowest frequency I've ever been exposed to, just going whoom, 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 but much, much lower. I mean, my voice can't replicate it, The only thing in my life that I've experienced that was at that frequency or like near that frequency was scuba diving while humpback whales are vocalizing. And if anybody's been fortunate enough to experience that, when the humpback whale sings their song, wavelength is so long, it hits your body and it just lights your entire body up, and you feel the sound wave as a wave moving through you. And that's exactly what this was, except it was pulsating. It was a steady, regular rhythm that never changed. And so this thing comes out of the sky, out of nowhere, apparently. I believe that it portaled in and then came right to me. And my immediate thought, as this thing's hovering above me, my immediate thought was, wow, that's a low frequency. And then immediately after that was, holy crap, I'm going to get taken. And, but I was like surprised, but I wasn't afraid, which was really interesting. I mean, everybody always asks me, oh my God, were you afraid? And I wasn't afraid at all. I was, this energy coming off of this thing had lit me up into the most awake state that I had ever been in my life that I'm aware of, and there was no fear. And after about a second or two, I realized, wait, no, they're not going to take me. They're talking to me. And so, just to kind of pause that for a second and describe the craft, the craft was a physical craft. It wasn't like a light ship, like a lot, when you encounter like Arcturan energy, a lot of times it's like light ships. It was a physical craft. It was shaped kind of like an almond, meaning that like if I were to orient the nose of the craft like vertically pointing up, it would be like this. It was like it kind of came to a point that was like fairly sharp. And then on the backside, or the like, what in the terms of like our aviation would be like where the engine would be, like on a fighter jet or something. The back of it was it was rounded, but it was blunt. It was like rounded off, and then it was pointy on the front, and it was shaped. Looking at it in profile, it probably would have been shaped kind of like a squished football a little bit. Like if we were looking at it from the edge on, it would have, there was like there wasn't like a cockpit or anything like that. I mean, even though I never saw the top of the craft visually, this is what I've seen in my mind, like in my third eye. The bottom of it, though, was rounded as well. It was the way that it was oriented as I'm standing and looking up. It was oriented like this, like directly over my head, so that the pointy part was pointing towards my back, and it was directly overhead, and it was like chrome silver. It was absolutely chrome silver, and this is where like the interesting trick of our perception comes in, is that while I'm seeing this, like I'm seeing it clearly, there was a field distortion around it that was just like in the movie The Predator. But fast forward, the recent movies of The Predator, where like the field distortion was completely bending light around the ship. So as I'm looking at it, I could see it was like chrome silver in my mind, but it was also like invisible. It was, I could see like the sky and the clouds behind it, and all there was this distortion, which that kind of freaked out my mind after the experience for about a year and a half. I couldn't understand why I saw both ways, and eventually I ended up coming across a program, I think on the Discovery Channel, that was interviewing a physicist about like UFO technology, and they asked him, well, what would a UFO look like? And he said, well, it probably wouldn't look like anything. It would probably be invisible, because they operate with this gravity propulsion system that neutralizes gravity, and if you have a strong enough gravitational or like electromagnetic field, you'll bend light around the object. And so when I heard that, I was like, bam, like that's it. That's the puzzle piece that I was missing, was that the field of energy was so strong coming off of this thing. It literally was wrapping light around the craft. So it was simultaneously invisible, and I could see it inside my third eye. So then, yeah, in that moment, right, this is like, that's what I'm perceiving. This thing is hovering directly above my head, and I've realized, wait a second, they're not going to take me, they're talking to me. And so at this point, I had already been really interested in kind of metaphysical things, and I had a pretty strong third eye already. And I went like into my third eye energy, and I was trying to like listen, if you will. I probably like had this really funny look on my face, like scrunched up, trying to hear what they were telling me. And there was nothing. Like, I mean, there was nothing that I could consciously tune into. And I immediately, like, I knew enough just to like stop and just be present. So I just stopped and I stood there. And the craft hovered over me in total, maybe 30 seconds or something. It was actually a fairly brief encounter, but it was an ever-present moment. The entire time, just whoom, 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 pulsating through every single cell in my body. And then eventually the craft, it rotated, and it began flying up to my left. It flew up this side canyon that I was in, where the spring was located. And as it was flying, it was hugging the contour of the tops of the trees. So like it's flying up from my right to left, and it's kind of going like this, like up and over a ridge line. And so it went over a ridge line, and the intensity dropped immediately by like at least 50%. And I realized what had happened is it crossed behind a ridge line, and it was no longer in direct line of sight. And after some seconds of traveling, it came back up, like it came back into line of sight above that ridge line, and the intensity was back, but it was further away from me. And so there was like a Doppler effect, as like it was getting further and further away from me. I could hear the sound frequency was changing, and the intensity was diminishing as it got further away from me. Eventually it traveled a long ways, by foot, hiking. It was easily a mile, and it's out of the national forest, and it was now over the Taos Pueblo Indian Reservation, which is like totally off limits. That they have a boundary fence, and you don't cross that fence. Like I would never cross that fence. And so it's now in an inaccessible area, if I were to like wanted to go and look at it or something. And eventually then it ended up turning off, or it portaled out, or what I saw in my mind was that it like went into the ground, or like in through like a lake or something, or a wetlands. But regardless of whatever it did, it stopped, and there was no more sound at all. And I stood there and I was just like listening, and it was dead stone cold silent for about 6 seconds. And suddenly all the forest noises came back. And so I was like hearing squirrels and birds and stuff, and like even wind in the trees. And I realized I had been in a completely silent forest. Like you've never been in a completely silent forest, and and I realized, I was like, wow, like that was incredible. That was a total void of sound. And then I realized it was over, like the experience was over, and I just started laughing, and I was like, what the hell was that? Like what just happened to me? And I immediately thought, I was like, well, I guess it's time to go home, And so I began hiking back home, and as I was hiking home, all these insights started pouring in, and about these craft, and that this type of situation is fairly regular. That there are a lot of craft that go in and out of the Taos area, and so I had all these insights. Got myself back home, and I was going to go home and see my fiance, and I realized, I was like, I don't even think I can talk right now. So I went next door to where we have this kind of crazy mountain man neighbor, and I knocked on his door. And he opens the door and he looks at me and he goes, "What the heck happened to you?" Because I must have looked like I was I was in a completely altered state. I mean, I must have looked really weird, And I said, "Well, I think I just had my first close encounter." And he goes, "Come on in," And so I came in and talked to him, and eventually I was like, okay, I'm like right now that I can go home and I can talk with her, and and so we went home and shared the experience, and it really, in the immediate after effect, the experience didn't really change anything. It was super exciting that it confirmed to me that this was real, that these things really exist. This was not technology, from the consensus reality of our Earth technology. Even though I know that our secret programs have this technology, this was definitely, though, like I knew it was something from off planet, and that kind of just stayed in the background. And eventually, so that was in April of 2004. And eventually then I began practicing healing work. And like I told you, I learned theta healing, and then I began doing my own thing. My own modality began coming through. And, fast forwarding then into 2009, I was doing some regression work with a very close friend of mine named Stacy. And she's an extremely gifted regression therapist, among other modalities. And she was told, we were looking for something else, actually, some other kind of healing, and she was told to go back into that experience. And so under hypnosis, we went back into the experience, and I got to relive the experience, and I got a huge download, of information about these beings and why they had come to me, where they were from, what they were doing, what I'm supposed to be doing. And so that really, then once I got that information, it really kind of launched my direction, which I haven't, turned back from.
So and nothing since then.
I've had nothing like that. I have had another close encounter. It's funny, I forgot to mention this in a couple of earlier interviews that I've done, but there's one other time that I've come across that same type of frequency, although it's not the same. It wasn't the same craft, because I have a relationship with the pilot of the craft. Like, she's one of my primary guides. There was another time, this is now probably like 2012, 2013, somewhere in there. I mean, I could probably go back and find the date if I really thought about it, but somewhere in there, I was hiking with a friend on a different mountain near Taos, and we got buzzed by something that we never saw, but it had the same exact, like, whoa, 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 whoa. It was like, it was a faster speed in the pulsations, and it flew around, and we both, we both knew exactly what was going on, that it was a UFO. We never saw it, but that's the only other time that I can remember having, an experience in that kind of proximity. I see them all the time. I mean, we, living in Taos, we're very fortunate that there's very, very little light pollution. I mean, on any given night that with a clear sky, you can walk outside, and if you're staring up at the sky long enough, you're going to see things that look like satellites that are not satellites. You'll see really, sometimes they're super bright. They'll flash at you. They'll jump around in the sky. I mean, so like, I've seen craft. I mean, I don't even know how to estimate how many I've seen. I've had some pretty incredible experiences viewing them.
So and then after that second where you got buzzed, did you ever do a regression about that?
I never have, actually. That's something I think that's a good idea. I never even thought about it actually, and but I'd be curious about what that was, because I was with a friend, and he was really into the UFO situation, and he's like a storm chaser and like a ghost hunter, and one of those kinds of guys. And
did you have a contact feeling as a result of that encounter, or just you just felt like you were buzzed?
It felt like something happened, that they at least like scammed us or something. There was some level of interaction, but like it wasn't anything like the close encounter I had in 2004.
Do you have missing time?
I've had missing time from other experiences. The experience that I had with the close encounter in 2004, I don't have any missing time within the like linear remembrance of the experience, which I'll never forget. I don't believe, and even under the regression, they said that they didn't, like, they activated my DNA and then they left. Like, they didn't need to take me or anything. There is one experience that I've had that where I've got missing time. This actually happened in Sedona, and it was definitely an encounter, because I looked at this also under regression. That was a little bit of a weird one, and wasn't quite as benevolent. Where we had an encounter with, I was with a friend. This is back in 2003, right before I moved to New Mexico, and I was in Sedona hiking with a friend. We were hiking up the backside of Cathedral Rock, and we suddenly, like, we felt like something was watching us and like following us, and she could see it. I couldn't see it, but I could feel it for sure. It was on the other side of the canyon, and we didn't know what it was. At that time, I wasn't quite as awakened into the situation as I am now, but at the time we definitely felt it, and it was really strange. We were low on water, like we didn't bring enough water with us. It was pretty hot, and so I'm sure we were dehydrated and tired. And as we were hiking along, there was this big cedar tree on the path that we were on, and it was like the way that the cedar tree had grown, the branches were like straight sideways, and there was a perfect spot for us both to sit down. And so we were like walking, and this fatigue overcame us immediately, and we sat down. And while we were sitting down, there was also this buzzing, right, like cicadas. Like, and we as we were hiking, it was really strange. I mean, I'm sure people could probably relate to this. Like, we would be hearing the cicada type sound, and it would like rise in intensity, and then it would be like a bubble burst, and we would like walk through it, and boom, there'd be no more frequency. And we were making note of that, going, what is this? Like, what's going on with the sound? And while we were sitting under this tree, we just like almost started to fall asleep. And the last thing that I remember was a grasshopper, like a quote unquote grasshopper, jumped up in front of my face, and it was hovering, wings, bzzz, and it was at eye level, and its face like zoomed in. My perception zoomed in on this face, and it looked like a mantid type creature, or I mean, it was a grasshopper, but it was huge. It filled my entire field of vision, and then nothing. And then the next thing I know, my friend and I are both a little bit disoriented, and we didn't think anything really of it, but we were like, oh, that's weird. We like took a nap, like what just happened, And then we got up and we finished hiking up to the top of Cathedral Rock, and there was something, as time went on, there was something that like sat with me, like didn't sit very well with me about, remembering that experience. And I eventually looked at it under regression. And what I was shown was that this was those beings that are called, people call them reptoids.
Stacy? With Stacy again?
It was with, the regression was with Stacy. Yeah.
Okay.
And so we looked at that experience, and what we saw was that we had a contact experience where these I guess they're called reptoids. They're like grays. They're kind of like grays. They're about 4.5 feet tall, and humanoid. That one of these beings, they essentially took us, and we were taken up in the craft, like off planet, and then we were brought back. And my sense is that they like took genetic material and like against our will, whatever. And so that's the only situation that I know of that I've got missing time, and it wasn't I don't have any fear or anything around that, and like hopefully nobody gets triggered even in hearing me relay that story. And there was no fear even at the time. It was just kind of like, it was almost like an arrangement or something, I'm not really sure. But yeah, that's the only missing time that I'm aware of.
So would you, if someone said Ryan's an abductee, would you disagree with that, or would you say, oh no, I'm not an abductee? How does that sit with you?
I've actually never even thought about that. I would say that technically I probably am because of that experience, at least from what I've come to understand. I haven't gone into it in a lot of depth, but from what I was shown, we were taken, and it wouldn't have been something that in this moment, I definitely would not choose. I would definitely not choose to be taken by a reptoid, but at the time, I was naive, and I probably would have been interested in having a contact experience. So I guess technically I would say that I guess I would be an abductee, but I don't identify with that at all. I mean, yeah. It's no part of my reality. And I am more, as a contactee, if we called me a contactee, absolutely. I've had lots and lots and lots of contact engagement with star beings. It happens all the time. Mm-hmm. So.
Interesting. And then you're like when you were talking earlier about when you were a child, you had like what you would call almost like a blank slating type of experience where.
Yeah, that must be. I mean, that's how I have to understand it, because when I've looked at those experiences and like listening to Mary Rodwell talk about the people that she's worked with, I really can relate with a lot of what they say. I mean, easily 70% of it feels familiar to me. And so my understanding is that I probably was involved with those programs where these advanced beings are coming in, either positive or neutral, benevolent. It never felt negative to me. But that they were coming in and they were working with me, taking me at night. And I feel like, or I've seen, a little bit through the regression work that, I was being like trained or something.
Yeah.
And, my understanding of that now, I would probably say that it's the same reason why I had the close encounter that I had would be because my DNA, the frequency signature within my DNA was identified as having some level of connection as like a star seed, what we would call like a star seed. And so I feel like that those groups that are working with children, when you hear these stories about like kids being taken on board a craft and they're being taught advanced physics and their, creativity being accelerated and things like that, that's in part because of their frequency signature, identifying them as having this connection as like a star seed. Now I know that's exactly what happened with my close encounter, in that the being that was piloting the craft, I saw that there were two people on board the craft. They're humans, but they're extraterrestrial. They would most closely look like, if we were to imagine like the blue people from Avatar, like really no tail, but like really tall, a blue-green skin tint, a little bit grayish sometimes. They have an elongated head, or maybe slightly widened, so they have these craniums that are really large. And I'm told that this is where the connection in with the Paracas skulls comes from. I know a lot of people are talking about like pre-Adamites, connected into those skulls, and my information is slightly different, but that's, I don't know if I'm right, but that's just what I've seen, what I've been told, was that these beings were living in Peru thousands and thousands of years ago, 60,000 years ago, 50,000 years ago. They built absolutely immense pyramids that are still standing, but we think they're mountains. They're literally like vegetated, and we think that they're mountains, but they're actually pyramids. And kind of like what's going on down in Indonesia that, Graham Hancock has been like bringing out to the world.
Right.
They built these pyramids. They were essentially like spiritual ambassadors, exceedingly advanced technology related to DNA, especially, completely benevolent. I'm told that they're like what we would call low sixth density. The density terminology that I use is slightly different than the law of one. The law of one talks about fourth density as being ascension. I'm told that fourth density is like a transitional, like a phase shift kind of state, and that fifth density, 5D, is like where the ascension is. So these beings would be at the next density up, so that they still occupy a physical body, but that their consciousness is not limited to that physical body. Their consciousness can go anywhere, it can project. And that's essentially what's going on, is that these star beings that were on board that craft, they came forward in time. So, their technology is not limited at all by time. And so they can navigate time, they can navigate space instantaneously. And she, the woman that was on board the craft, she needed to find herself in a future timeline. And so they targeted like her DNA and targeted that frequency, and they identified me. So I'm a future incarnation, where one of her future incarnations, the consciousness of that being is projected into an incarnation on Earth right now, and that's who I am. This is what I've learned. And so she was coming forward in time in order to activate her own DNA, essentially, but activate my DNA, so that the mission that I'm here to fulfill can be functional. And that's exactly what they did. They used the frequency signature. It's just like tuning into a radio station, that once it's tuned in, they can see you. You are identified on Earth as an individual out of the 7 billion individuals. And she came and she found me, turned on my DNA in about 30 seconds, and then they left. And so, so that's what I've learned, at least about that experience and why it's happened. And, there's been so much learning. I mean, my whole life has been changed since then.
And you have a son and a daughter.
I do. Yeah. I have a teenage son who's an incredible young man, and he's huge. He's taller than me. He's like a little over 6 feet tall, and he's 13.
Oh my
gosh. Yeah, I'm like 5'11". I'm like about average, maybe slightly taller than average. I don't know. And he's going to be a big boy. And then I've got a daughter, a beautiful young woman. She's 11.
Oh wow. And so do you work with them with your work, or I mean, how does that work with your kids? I mean, in terms of your experiences and your work and your healing and.
Yeah, there is nothing really that I edit or hide from them in any kind of way. They're fully aware of the work that I do and how I help people and how I teach and things like that. I do work with them occasionally. People would probably assume that like we're always doing healing sessions, but I feel like, but it's just not true. I mean, yeah. I don't remember the last time I actually sat like in a healing session with my kids. But we do readings together. Every solstice, every equinox, I do a 10-card reading, and I actually have it up on the wall over here. I built a frame and I mount the cards. Like in that reading, I use a special deck, the first ever deck that I bought. Those cards get mounted. They're only used for those readings. And so like they're into it for sure. A lot of the healing work that I do with them is probably more of in our kind of day-to-day living and like being a father and trying my best to really help them be conscious, present, integral little humans, And
you're a full-time dad?
I am, although my kids, my wife and I split up about 2.5 years ago, so I'm divorced, and they split time between the two of us.
Oh, okay.
And so, and as does the dog. We have a dog, and so the dog goes with the kids,
Wow.
So the dog travels with us. And
but you guys are local, so she's still okay, that's cool.
Yeah. And she'll she owns a house here, and we I mean, barring unforeseen circumstances, I'll be in Taos through the time when my daughter's out of high school, just because we want to have that continuity for them. And but I have an amazing relationship with my ex. I mean, she's my best friend in ways maybe that we weren't even while we were married, and we had a really we had a really wonderful marriage in many ways, and I'm so grateful. I'm really good friends with her.
And the kids are in public school?
They are, although they both are in charter schools. We have charter schools in New Mexico.
Right.
So yeah, my son is in this really amazing school that they do a lot of work online, but they have the opportunities to do a lot of STEM arts, STEM classes, and so he's like taking like an advanced placement robotics class right now, and he's a seventh grader working with a senior in high school, and they're going to go and compete at this international robotics competition as their final project, at the end of the year. And so there's a lot of amazing opportunities there. And my daughter's charter school is an art-based curriculum, so they integrate arts into all of the curriculum. So it's, it feels like they're in private school in a way, but it's publicly funded. So we're pretty fortunate.
Yeah, that sounds good. That sounds like I don't hear stories like that in California.
Yeah, we're very fortunate. We have a very progressive community here, and of course, though, New Mexico, it's such a struggle. The teachers really struggle to work hard to provide a good education for the kids, and they're just completely underfunded. I mean, education's underfunded everywhere, but New Mexico, I think, ranks like number 49 or number 50 in the U.S. with education, like all the time. It's really disappointing. Like a really high percentage of dropouts out of the public schools, and but our kids they'll see their way through, and if they want to go to college, we'll figure that out, and if they don't want to go to college, we'll figure that out too. But they're both good kids. They're pretty bright.
Yeah. Okay, well, I really appreciate you doing this with me.
Yeah, I appreciate it.
It's great to meet you this way too.
Awesome.
Because we haven't had a chance. Now, did you go to Rob Potter's Secret Space program in Shasta in 2016? Were you there?
I didn't. I was not. No, I saw it and I wanted to go. I didn't make that happen. I did go to the Eclipse of Disclosure this last year.
Oh, you did?
In
Okay.
Shasta.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah, because I came right after you guys left for Eric Raines's retreat.
Oh, yeah.
So I was with Eric, and I think he had like 30 students there in McLeod.
Yeah, I remember
same
hearing
place.
about that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a wonderful place. That was my first time, or second time ever in Shasta, but my first time spending some time there, and wow, like what a place. Mount Shasta is incredible.
Yeah, it is.
Get back.
Yeah. Yeah, I have a lot of fondness for that place. I used to live there actually in the late 90s. So
that must have been incredible.
Okay, well, once again, thank you so much. And I'm going to wrap it up. Is there anything else that you'd like to say before? People could find you at gammawavehealing.com. They could set up sessions with you. Do you have your events posted there? Your plan for the year in terms of where you're going and where people could see you if they're not in the Taos area?
I'm going to have that up probably this week. Now that things are kind of coming, I've been trying to maneuver the logistics, especially of my trip to Scandinavia. Yeah. But now that things are a little bit more solid, I'm going to put everything up. Yeah. And they're, through the website, you can book appointments through the website, and it's linked into, I have a scheduling app there. So the calendar should be pretty accurate. It's linked through, you can pay in a number of different ways. And then there also are you can contact me. I mean, occasionally if people want me to, to come and do a presentation, or if you're maybe let's say, I'm going to be going up to Calgary, let's say, to do this group workshop. If somebody if they were interested in scheduling me to come in and do a presentation to talk about my contact experiences, and I've done that before as well. The website, I want to give a shout out to John and Dana at modernmasters.org. They're incredible. They're co-sponsoring the Soul Tech conference at ECETI in August.
Oh, okay.
And they are the ones that rebuilt my website. I had my website through Squarespace, and was really happy with it, but I knew that I needed to kind of power it up a little bit, because I've been intending to do some new different things through the website. And John and Dana rebuilt the website, and they provide incredible support. It looks beautiful. Pretty soon there are going to be things we're going to have webinars and podcasts. I'm going to have downloadable content as well on there. There are a lot of different guided meditations that I lead that are activations and healing meditations, and so I'm going to become that those changes are coming. I'm going to get a little bit more involved. So people can follow the website or my Facebook page, which is also Gamma Wave Healing.
Right, right.
You can send me a friend request, my personal Matthew Ryan page. I'm happy to connect. I love all the connections. We're like all the soul tribe is like reuniting right now, and the information is like fractaling out between us. It's really, really a beautiful thing. And, so go ahead. And I am on Twitter. Rita and Jimmy wanted me to get up on Twitter, and I was like opposed to being involved on Twitter.
I know. I got to show you. This is my phone. So you and I are probably similar in that regard. This is my phone.
Oh, nice.
It's from Consumer Cellular for us old folks. It's like really, really economical. And so that's my phone. Like, I can't text on it or nothing, it's like, I could use it as a doorstop or, I'm kind of reluctant around all this, but I get you on the website thing. I've been going through the same thing with my website. I have downloadable, all, like I turn all the interviews that I do, or not all, but a lot of the interviews I do, I turn into MP3 files, which you can just go and download them from my website. And so it's fun. There's a lot of cool things you can do now that you couldn't do 10, 15 years ago without breaking the bank or getting into weirdness. But thanks again so much for doing this. And you're going to have a busy, exciting year. And so good wishes to you for that. And I want to thank everybody for joining us. And we'll be back. Bye.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Denny. We'll see you later.